morning. Thanks everyone for attending. This morning we're in our second installment of 6, Demystifying the Carrier Buzz from Voice and Data Networks and Jim Sevelier. My name's Joe Hines, and I thank everyone for attending. I'm the owner of Voice and Data Networks, and we're putting on this seminar webinar in order to provide value to our clients. And what we hope is going on is that we're providing that value via education on topics that are relevant in today's telecommunications world. And we like to take ourselves and put out thought leadership so that our clients can progress on a thought leadership path of their own. Last month we did SIP Essentials, and we got very, very good attendance on SIP Essentials. We again have very, very good attendance here on SIP and Presence. One of the things we are doing is after you've listened to a webinar, we come back to you via email in the succeeding month with the key points from that webinar. And last month there were 4 key points, and I hope you found those valuable. In this webinar, we're going to do SIP Essentials, and there's going to be 2 key points that will come to you via email. The materials are also available to you on our website, and I recommend you come to those positions and pick up those materials. So for this morning, I wanted to say about 3 things. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed this. Please give us any feedback and all feedback about whether or not we're hitting the mark, not hitting the mark, ways we can improve, topics we could engage you with that you find relevant in the future, because we want these things to be valuable. And the other thing I did want to point out on this particular series is it is a 6-part series, but each and any one of them can be taken in its own light. So it's not really necessary. I don't want anybody to think if they miss one that they're not going to be able to handle 2 or something like that, or 3 or 5 or whatever. Just please attend anyone that works for you and obtain any value it has. So again, my name is Joe Hines. I thank you all for coming. I own Voice and Data Networks. Patty Page is our marketing director, and she keeps everybody informed, gets these things set up, and I'm going to take this moment to introduce Jim Sevelier, who has given our first installment and is ready to give our second installment. So with that, Jim, could you take it off?
Yes, thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate that, and thank you very much for the introduction. There's good key points there, Joe, on the compartmental nature of this solution, of this series. The nice thing about it is that we get the ability to, I guess, well, I gotta basically put up the right presentation. How about that? There we go. All right, now we're cooking. Now we're on all cylinders. But Joe, to your point, I think that from a compartmentalized perspective, I think one of the interesting things about SIP is that there's so many elements associated to it, and although they're all interrelated, that any one of the elements, I mean, we could spend almost a day, if not more, just going through each of these individual series if necessary, and I think that's why there's such a great connection between the follow-up after we're done with these presentations and just to make sure that there's additional questions that arise. I mean, we're basically scratching the surface here. And in each one of those sessions, they can and are, in amongst themselves, topics of discussion to bring up and to have a discussion with both IT professionals and business professionals. So, Joe, thank you very much for that. So let's jump into today's session when we're talking about presence. The interesting thing about this, today's topic, all right, last month's topic, you know, we talked a lot about some of the infrastructure associated with SIP. What does it take to get SIP running? What does it take to have SIP integrated into your organization? How does it function? How does it work? And we took it at a very basic level, but I think we were able to identify some of the key elements and some of the key technologies. Well, today what I'd like you guys to have in your head as we go through this session today is perhaps I want you to have this question in the back of your head. So I'm gonna throw this question out. It's a rhetorical question. I don't necessarily need any answers on any of the chat sessions, but the question that I think that is paramount to not only the discussion of SIP, but the discussion of the evolving nature of communications is this: would you change the way you communicate if you knew who you were trying to communicate with, if you knew their status, if you knew where they were? Would you change the way you communicate if you had presence information? If I could tell before I called home whether or not the person I was looking for was actually at home, I mean, would we change the way we communicate? Would we change the way we work? And one of the interesting discussions about that topic, or that surrounds that question, is that it touches on the need for more efficient communications. Communications today it's basically blind. You do have information on someone's telephone number, but you don't know if they're at that number. The interesting thing about that simple concept, the interesting thing about it is that it pushes us towards an entirely different communications medium, because we don't know where you're at, so we might as well call the phone that is most likely with you or on your person, which is a mobile device. When people ask me and talk to me about the popularity of mobility, there's a lot of reasons, but I think significantly the main draw to mobility is you're likely to get that person, because the phone is portable, it's mobile, it's in their pocket, it's in their purse, and that's what makes mobility interesting. But even the cellular devices are unintelligent by nature, in the sense that they don't tell us where people or who people are and what their status currently is. But if we had that information, would we change the way we do business? And I think that's ultimately the question that I want to get to here. Would we change the way we do business? So keep that in the back of your mind, because what I'm hopefully going to show you today is why there is going to be we're going to move away from device centricity. We're going to move away from calling a device, and we're going to reach into the network and try to communicate to a user, to an individual, to a person. And then the network, through SIP, through presence, is going to navigate and deliver our communication request to the person that we're trying to reach. Think about that. That's a big, huge difference between where we're at today and where we're going. Now, the other thing that comes along with presence is obviously it gives us a richer experience, right? It gives us enhanced services. We can now that we have SIP, and now that we can add video from last month's discussion, we talked about adding video and how the voice session that was established doesn't have to be terminated in order to start an all-new video session with voice, that we can just overlay communications on top of communications. That's really the value, right? It's that multimodality, if you will, right? But even though it's giving us more, the most interesting from my perspective is the simplification that goes on within the network. The architecture is drastically simplified when we're layering technologies, when we're layering communications technologies instead of running in a linear fashion, voice, then data, then voice, then video, then chat, layer them so that they're all simultaneously operable. And that just simplifies the architecture considerably, and we'll talk about that too in the coming months. But I guess the key point here is as well, do I need SIP? Do I need to have SIP like running on my computer and running on my telephone in order to take advantage of some of these capabilities? Well, the quick answer is no. SIP is already on your computer. The user agent that we talked about in last month's session, the concept of having a program that can tell whether or not keys are being manipulated or that the mouse is moving or something like that, that sort of information is being collected by these user agents. We talked about it with instant messaging as an example of that, where when someone is typing a response, it says, hey, so-and-so is typing, and it does that to let you know that that someone else on the remote end is typing on their keyboard. So it's almost like a hey, pause, wait up, don't say anything, and let this person say what they need to say, so that you don't get in front of a conversation. Now, do you need to have all these SIP elements in play in order to take advantage of SIP? No, not necessarily, but if you have the SIP elements in play, it certainly makes the return on investment calculations a lot easier, because you can then simplify the architecture. You can take advantage of multiple modes of communication, and yes, you can then determine whether or not I'm typing on my keyboard, which means I'm probably sitting at my keyboard, which means I'm probably at this physical location where my keyboard is located. So there's some interesting things that we can do, and simple keystroke manipulation and logging is really some of the basics that SIP can do. I mean, there's a lot that SIP can do in determining presence, and we're going to go through some of that today. Probably the most talked about element of SIP is presence. That gets the most marketing and press out in the industry today, and no wonder. I mean, it is definitely a game changer. Probably the most key element, which makes it more interesting and unique in the standpoint of how SIP is that it's written in an extensible language. It's written in Web 2.0. It's written in a standards-based format. That makes it easy for third-party developers, entrepreneurs, thought leaders to come up with an idea and simply write the code to connect what you do to what I do, or what your computer does to what you do, or what your business does to what your servers do. I mean, that's really ultimately SIP's role in the transformation process of communication. SIP's role is, hey, let's connect two things that don't normally talk to each other. Let's put them into a common context. That would be XMPP. It could also be SIP simple. We could use HTML, XML. We can use a lot of different code technologies to actually develop a link between two dissimilar applications, like voice and a web interface, an internet interface, voice to an automation process that's running on a manufacturing facility. I mean, there's a lot of different things. There's really, at the point in time, since everything is now becoming more and more web-enabled and more internet-enabled and more extensible, and that's really a key word. Extensibility is a key word here, and definitely I would go on Wiki and really get a firm grasp on that word as you go throughout, talking to peers and customers and business leaders about why SIP is so important. That extensibility is really the key. Because it is a standard, because there is no ambiguity about that standard, it makes it easy for different vendors to coexist inside of the environment. So I started out talking about SIP and presence, and now I'm talking about extensibility and multi-vendor interoperability. That they're so closely related and tagged, it's difficult to separate them. And yes, we do know SIP and presence from instant messaging applications that we have currently on our computers, but it can do so much more. It can be a lot more. And I think that's really the value proposition. So at this point, if you want to go ahead and run the poll, Patty, that would be great. I don't think I have the ability to run the poll, so I've got the placeholder here, but I don't know if you've got it running. Now I've got a question whether or not I have to run back out here, and do I need to change the presenter?
The poll is launched, Jim.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that, Patty. I'll let everyone take. I can see the responses here. Good. So I think everyone pretty much gets it. Do I need to buy a SIP telephone? So no, you don't need to buy a SIP telephone in order to have presence, right? So what's interesting is that's really the interesting element here is that, we have that ability to, I think I'll take back over being the presenter, correct? Is that what I do? All right. My apologies to everyone here. We're sort of still trying to learn the handoff between these two, being a remote presenter. So I'm going to, there we go. This makes it kind of interesting, or not. Still can't seem to get back to the presentation, so I'm going to load it back up. Here we go. Okay. So what's interesting, and Patty, I'm going to ask for an audio response back from you to make sure that everyone can see. Can you see the PowerPoint slides? Because I'm not comfortable with that.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Patty.
Yes.
So here's the interesting thing. So we don't absolutely need presence. We don't need SIP on our telephones in order to get these elements. SIP actually resides on the computer. It's only if you do want those features on your phone would you need a SIP telephone. So the key element here is that SIP is not a replacement strategy for you as an individual. So if you're coming at this, if you're on this call, you're either an end user, IT support, business management. If you're looking at, answering this question, let me just answer it right now. You don't need to replace the telephones on your desk in order to get SIP, right? You can add the user agent at your computer, give your computer the ability to communicate through SIP. Only if you want those features, those capabilities, the video inside the telephone type of capabilities, would you need to put in a SIP telephone, right? So that's the first thing that I think, and again, they do make SIP telephones, and they make them for a reason, and that's because certain individuals like that capability of having not to have their computer on in order to have the functionality that they enjoy. So, I get it, but this is not a replacement strategy. This is not a, hey, let's rip out everything that we've got already installed. Let's just take this one step at a time and add SIP as a user agent inside of our computing environment. So I guess the point here is that, does SIP become, now, saying all of that, what is SIP? I mean, or what is presence? What is this? Is it a function of the network? Do we get it? Is it a feature, or is it a service? Is it a capability, right? What is it? Which one is it? Is it a function that makes networks more intelligent, or is it more of a feature that allows us to type back and forth to each other? So it's interesting when you look at this, and the graphic that you're seeing here is the Avaya Aura graphic. If you're not familiar with Avaya, their solution integrates SIP and presence at a core voice application perspective. So in this slide, they actually have a presence service in that red area. And that presence service connects to their telephone and their computer user agent elements. So, and the key to that is that, yes, if all we're doing is adding presence, a presence overlay to the network, by the way, we're not, I'm saying it as though, snap, it's now presence. It takes a little bit of work, meaning there needs to be a strategy behind it, right? So it's not like the first thing I want to do with SIP is to add presence. You know what? If you do, that's a really good thing because you immediately make the network more intelligent. And when you make the network more intelligent, you make better decisions on how to utilize those communication tools, right? It's not that you're just picking up a phone, dialing somebody's mobile phone because it's easy. You actually know that they're not on their mobile phone, that they're actually at a remote office on an extension that you never even knew about, but you don't even have to know that anymore because we're not dialing telephones. We're not dialing numbers anymore. So when we look at this, to me, the service is having that intelligence on the network is certainly a value add. But to me, that's sort of like table stakes now. That element is what helps me pay for and integrate the function element, which to me is by far of the two the more valuable to an enterprise. And look, so the short answer here is presence is both function and service. I'm saying that the function is, I believe, a lot more valuable than the service. Now, you can't have one without the other, so we could probably argue the chicken and the egg all day long with that. But when you talk about the overlay of function, when you talk about function and not as a service overlay, here's the interesting thing that happens with SIP. This is to me and to many other thought leaders throughout the industry, this is the key element to SIP. When we're talking about presence, I no longer have to tell you every device that I could possibly be on, right? So in the past, there's an example of a business card here where, to better serve my customers, let me tell you all the ways that you can get a hold of me. Here's my email, here's my fax, here's my voicemail, here's my pager, pagers. Okay, so maybe this is an old business card. I'll grant you that. But the value proposition back then was, here, let me tell you everywhere I could be, and it's up to you to just hunt through and get me on whatever device you think you can get me on. And that's sort of what led to a lot of the popularity of mobile devices, quite honestly, because, you know what, you think I'm going to look at and try to dial you 5 times just on the off chance I'm going to find you? No, I'm just going to default down to what is most likely going to be on your person, and that'll pretty much guarantee that I'll get through to you. And if I don't, if you're not on your mobile device, then you're pretty much not accessible to the network. So that's sort of how we come across with the mobile environment. But look, we don't have to connect the numbers anymore. I don't need to call your cell phone. I don't need to call your office. What I need to do is make a connection request into the SIP network, and through presence, SIP will determine your location. That's pretty powerful. Think about it. You don't call me, you don't call Patty, you don't call Joe. You look up Joe, you make a connection request to Joe Hines at Voice and Data Networks. And when you do that, the network then, based on the rules that Joe has assigned to his connection status, will deliver you to the location that Joe chooses for you to be at. If you're within Joe's inner circle and he wants, maybe you're a family member of Joe's, then you've got connection capability to him 24/7, 365, no matter where he's at, right? So that rule is that if I identify you as a family member of Joe's, then if I can identify you through your presence that that's who you are, I'm going to let you through to wherever Joe's at, no matter what he's doing. But if you're a salesperson that's trying to reach Joe, you've never met Joe before, Joe may have a different rule established for people that he doesn't know. But again, we're all doing now, from this point forward, once SIP is universally delivered through the carrier network, then we stop making requests for dial tone through telephone numbers. Then we go to a SIP address and we just enter Joe's name. Now, Joe may have a unique name. Maybe there's like 50 Joe Hines. Maybe there's 50 Joe Hines that live in the same area that Joe lives at. How do we then determine whether or not it's Joe at Voice and Data? Well, that's where all of the address is being looked at. You're thinking to yourself, wow, my telephone can't dial characters. Yes, it actually can, because dial tones are normally, there's dial tones associated to each alphanumeric or alphabet character on a telephone, but it's very cumbersome. So we're going to have to come up with new ways of dialing. And enter Skype. Enter the world where we're utilizing a terminal type mode to connect to people rather than a touchpad mode. Right? This is where it becomes really interesting. And the reason for that is that since SIP can talk, voice and data and text and chat, and it understands keyboard strokes and everything that I'm doing, then I could literally just say, Okay, so this is Jim Sevier. Presence knows me as Jim Sevier, knows all my contacts, knows that Joe Hines is in my contact database. So I could tell SIP, call Joe Hines. I could just speak those words. And the SIP server would look at it and say, is there a Joe Hines in Jim's catalog? Yes. Where can I find Joe Hines at? Here. I'm going to launch this connection request to Joe without Jim having to dial anything. And then off it goes. And Joe's return says, hey, I've got an incoming connection request from Jim Sevier. Oh, Jim is in Joe's contact database. Jim is apply rule number 3 to Jim. And then my connection request goes into that rule. And it gets processed the way the rule asks it to be processed. I mean, it sounds very difficult from, Jim talking about it. In practice, it's very simple. Quite simple, actually, and quite interesting when you look at it from a technological perspective. Look at the solutions from, again, I'm taking Avaya as an example, but look at the solutions that Avaya brings to the table in presence and voice-activated dialing and text-to-speech and speech-to-text. All that's in there it's in there for a reason, is to simplify the connection request process. All right? So let me ask this question, and let's go ahead and start up a poll again. Let's go ahead and start up the poll, and let's hit the poll on whether or not SIP knows where I am. So go ahead and oh, I gotta engage that, Jim. Very good. See, I didn't trick you guys. I normally try to throw a little curveball in here, but you guys are getting it. This is very good. More than half of you have shown that SIP knows. Does SIP know where I am? No, it doesn't know exactly where you are. It only knows that a SIP element is being used. So more than the large percentage of you guys figured that out. So that's actually really good, because the interesting thing about SIP is, and I've got to get this thing back into PowerPoint mode. All right. Sorry about this. I have a screen up here. Come on, there you go. So one of the interesting things is about SIP is, my cat could be walking across my keyboard. SIP doesn't know that there's a human body. It doesn't even know that it's Jim typing on the keyboard. It could be my daughter typing on Jim's keyboard. But the way that we do this is through authentication. So when I go onto a network, it's not like I can just pick up any phone. I need to pick up a phone and authenticate who I am. And I can either authenticate through speech, I can authenticate through a PIN, but once we authenticate, and the authentication could just be the same authentication that you use to get onto the network. Like, to get through the AT&T network, you have to log in, right? You have to log in through, Google or whatever. Once you log in and I know that you're authenticated through network access control, then I know who you are. Then I know that Jim is on the keyboard, right? So even if I'm logged into the network, right, even if I am using a SIP-enabled device, SIP doesn't know that it's me. It only knows that it's me when it's been authenticated. And that's really the key element here. A lot of folks, when they look at SIP and they look at the presence element, they see this as sort of a big brother element. By the way, all the information that we're talking about here is currently available on the network. It's currently available internally on your own business networks and publicly. There needs to be an authentication process. And all we want to do now is use it as a way of making more efficient communication requests. And notice how I'm not calling them calls. Right? I don't want to make a call anymore. I want to make a communications request. If it ends up being a voice call, great. If it ends up being a text chat, no problem. If it ends up being a video conference call, again, no problem. Whatever communications mode or medium is best for the two of us making this communication request and a part of this this current slide that talks and just sort of reminding us what we went through last month about how SIP works. As long as that happens, as long as that's the scenario that we're working on, then who cares, right? Then it's really nothing more than, hey, we're communicating across the network. Who cares what medium we choose? So if we go back through this, the key elements, the foundational elements that we talked about last month are this SIP proxy server. That's really the device that sort of helps enable the authentication process. Who are we? You know, do we have the rights and the authorities that we're asking for? Does the person, and that's by the way where the rules are located, that says how we like to be communicated and by whom, right? So that's where all that stuff is located. And that SIP proxy server is actually just an application that's running on the voice application device, the voice application server, like the Avaya Aura Communication Manager server. That's just that proxy is running as a service underneath that. It could be a separate element, so there could be a backup proxy service running somewhere in the network on, you know, an HP, a Dell, you name the brand of server, but you could have it running someplace else. But a lot of vendors today put the presence element inside of the same element that runs the voice app. It makes sense. But again, just as a kind of reminder here, you know, user A wants to make a connection request to user B, so they send out a session request. And then that request is in turn looked at by the SIP proxy server. The proxy server dips into a database of registrar and location to determine where to send that call to user B. How is that user B found? And then the rules are negotiated back inside the proxy server, and then the SIP session is set up. Now, on your end, your communications device is telling you, I am currently making the communications request. By the way, we call that, you know, the phone ringing. So in the current network today, the phone ringing is the whole final process, continuous, saying, this is an acknowledgement that I found the person that you're requesting this call with, and I'm currently notifying them that there's a call on this device. And again, what'll change with SIP is that maybe there'll be a special tone on your cell phone for incoming SIP requests. Maybe there will be a screen that'll pop up on your new 55-inch Vizio flat panel television saying that there's a text chat request by a friend or a relative, you know, because it knows that you were just logged into your account on your cable channels and got information saying, oh, Jim's currently watching TV because he's logged in, and I can see the keystrokes on his remote control. I mean, it really is a unique solution when you talk about and get into the depth of what presence can deliver to the marketplace. Look, it's enough. It's okay. So it's very basic. Making a phone call today, you pick up the phone, you dial numbers, it makes the connection request, the routing gets covered, you know, and then on the other end it starts ringing. But you don't know anything about the other end. It just knows that the other end exists. That's all it knows, and that's enough for us today, right? What else do we need, Jim? We don't need anything more. Yeah, we sort of do, because now there's 5 or 6 or 7 devices that you could use to communicate with, and you could be in pretty much any location, right? The days of us sitting at our desks all day are nearly gone. I mean, they're evolving to more of a mobile environment where I could be sitting at my desk today and I could be sitting at your desk tomorrow, and vice versa, right? So the interesting thing about presence is that it gives us this concept of agility, business agility, that we've never had before. Then it overlays on top of that other types of devices that we can communicate through. And again, I can't stress that enough. When we have 5 or 6 devices, but you're only able to communicate through 1 or 2 of them, there's a limit to what you can do. But there is more options to you as a business individual, more decisions, better decisions that you can make once you know the device or devices that person, actually you don't even know the devices they're using. That's going to be hidden from you. You're just going to be making a connection request. Pure and simple. Hey, I need to call home. All right, here we go. I know home. There's all the connections for home. Off I go. Oh, your wife's currently watching, television. She's logged in, so I'm going to pop up the screen and let her know that you want to establish a voice-to-text session with her or voice-to-voice session with her. It's an interesting solution to consider what the possibilities are. And I'm not I am sort of one of those what-if kind of guys and the possibilities kind of guys. It does matter to me to deliver that type of information, but now the keys are being handed over to the end user, to us on this call, to write the code that connects whatever we can think of to communication. So if you've got an application that you've designed, a solution, a process that you've designed, and it is part of an automated platform that runs on a server, then there is a way for you to take triggers, key events, actions, cause and effect analysis, and take all of that and tie it to a telephone call, a chat, a video session, an email, to any number of different things. This modality, this multimodality, it's all going to be figured out in the network. So most of what I'm talking about here won't be, not even Buck Rogers in the 21st century. This is probably less than 10 years away. And that may be a lot of time for some people, but in the scope of things, it's a fairly short period of time. But the whole idea here is that having this capability, the key elements are already in place, and we're already playing with the rudimentary element of presence, which is the key logging capability, or the key reporting capability. And once we get past that, once we move on to what really what SIP can bring, then the sky's the limit. Then all we have to do is think up what it is that we want to get done. So, look, the other piece to this is that network simplification piece that I talked about in those 4 bullets. The network simplification piece cannot be understated here. The traditional telephone network, the traditional TDM, that's time division multiplexing, if you're looking for the acronym there, TDM, or time division multiplex trunks. It's sort of like the freeway. When you meter a freeway and only a car can go and 2 cars can go, and then you got to wait, you get a red light. That metering is a timing. They're timing cars getting on and off the freeway, and that's a form of time division multiplexing. It's where you get multiple time divisions running across a single circuit, and it makes the most use out of the available bandwidth between 2 points. But the interesting thing is that you have to set up this 8-lane freeway, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's still an 8-lane freeway there. But there's only, 1/10 of the amount of cars on the freeway. So what SIP would be, so that's called oversubscription, or undersubscription. That's where you've got so much bandwidth, but you've only got 1 or 2 cars, but you've designed it for its peak performance, or when it has the most bandwidth requests for it, which is, in LA, it's pretty much all day. No, from LA, it's like, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon until almost 7 or 8. So you have to have an 8-lane freeway there, but you really don't have to have an 8-lane freeway any other time. But you can't, make concrete shrink and grow. But that's, in effect, what SIP does at a network level. Right now, I have to pay for 8 lanes of traditional telephony because I have to assume the worst case that I'm going to have a significant oversubscription or over a large amount of requests to make the network work. Well, the interesting thing about SIP is that it allocates bandwidth based on current use. So you don't end up using bandwidth. You don't have to have a T1 with a huge amount of circuit space. You could literally have a 110 kilobit circuit if that's all you need, and it's almost like pay per use. It's very similar to the ability to just throttle up the network when you need the bandwidth and you pay for it, and then throttle it back down when you don't need it and you're paying a much lower rate. Instead of giving you a single number that says, here's your number, you pay for this whether you're using it or not. I mean, honestly, that simplification alone is the ROI, the return on investment for SIP. And companies are seeing, I worked on 5, 6, 7 projects in the last year, and without question, all of those projects were well underneath a 6-month return on investment. The majority of them were under 3 months, and there was one that was the return on investment was under, I think, like 4.5, 5 weeks. So based on how much bandwidth that you oversubscribe the network with, you can really get an interesting return on investment when you talk about network simplification through SIP. The reason why the network is more simple is because it's not spending a lot of time telling all the other elements network information in order for them to remain connected. SIP is a, hey, are you logged in? Yes. Are you logged out? Are you logged in now? No. Boom, done. That's pretty much most of the information that gets transported for SIP across the network. But a lot of networks transport a lot of information. We can get into that conversation probably 2 or 3 months from now when we start really getting into how SIP deploys in a carrier perspective. So here's the polling question. Do I need to have SIP carrier trunks in order to use SIP at the desktop? So I'm going to, again, go ahead and ask for the poll to jump in, and I'd like to see your responses on this one because I've made this one just a little bit more difficult. Oh, we've got a split house here. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, now we're going in a direction. That's interesting. Okay, this one was a little bit more difficult, guys. This one was, and I'm getting a split house here. This is almost straight down the middle. This is an interest. It's actually now straight up 50% each now. So, do I need to have SIP carrier trunks in order to use SIP at the desktop? The answer is actually no. You don't actually need SIP carrier trunks to use SIP at the desktop. The reason for that is that the telephone elements, the voice over IP server, can provide the necessary SIP connectivity inside the building. So do I need it? Do I need carrier trunks to use SIP to the desktop? No. But, so maybe this was a trick question, but if I had SIP carrier trunks, I could extend the value beyond the desktop, and it helps with my return on investment. So technically, you're both right. So the split group, that was exactly what I was hoping to see, because it also helps you when you're looking at this. If you said no, you're absolutely correct. You don't need it, right? SIP is local. I talked about it before, right? But if you said yes, you're also correct because you can then see the value that SIP brings to the equation when I can make the network simpler. Yes, I get the desktop functionality. Yes, I get multimodality. Yes, I get presence. Those are all very cool things. But then I make the network simpler. I'm only paying for what I use. Well, then that is really the return on investment calculation that I want, right? Because we don't get charged for anything internally to the building. We only get charged when we go out of the building. So very good. I'm glad to see the results on that one. And you never know with me. I'm either going to give you the black and the white, or I'm going to run the fence. And I ran the fence on that one on purpose because I really want us to see both sides to that equation. You know what? I can do SIP now. And you know what? SIP may be a really good idea right now to bring into your building. So don't wait for a SIP trunk from a carrier. Now, having the SIP trunk there, though, is going to make the return on investment calculation of the investment much easier. So, just look at it from that perspective. You're going to have an interesting dialogue and discussion with management, finance, but it'll be an interesting discussion. It'll be more interesting than most discussions that you have inside of IT today. So look, if we're looking at that simplification, we've got SIP being widely deployed within the carrier networks, right? The need for the translation between the old network and the SIP network, once SIP is fully deployed inside of the carrier network, then the need for all of these gateway devices, the things that take the traditional time division multiplexing and turns it into IP and then IP back to traditional, those types of devices will begin to be phased out of the network. And once we get from a pure SIP to SIP environment, then we will have substantially more efficient usage of bandwidth, more efficient usage of dial tone, more efficient communications because we know presence, and we will begin to really start living in the broadband world. We're not there yet. We're in the high bandwidth world, but we're not in the broadband world yet. We're not quite there. We got high bandwidth, but we're not broadband yet. And once we get there, we sort of have to leave behind the traditional telephone circuits. So if I can either, well, let me just give you the scoop. December 21st, 2009, AT&T submitted a proposal to deregulate the traditional telephone world, which means they want to stop spending money on analog telephone devices and digital telephone services. They want broadband telephone, broadband communications. So that process is already beginning, and eventually, within our lifetimes, we will see a crossover like we just saw between analog and digital television. We'll see that same crossover for communications. And again, the value proposition is strong for the carrier, so it will happen because they can remove a lot of equipment from the network. So look, so let me ask the question again, would you change the way you work if you could add more intelligence to the communication requests that you make? I think you would. I think if you stopped worrying about where people were, would be even better, right? So stop worrying about where people are. Start making requests of the network, and let the network find you, but let the network find you based on rules that the person you're trying to connect to controls, right? So it's not really Big Brother watching. It's my rules assigned to an open pool that people have access to me if and when I allow it. And that if and when I allow it is really the freedom that we like to have within communications, right? Honestly, it's not as important to me who connects to me as who doesn't connect to me. I don't want to have a salesperson calling me at home right at dinner time, right? So that's more important to me than anything else that could come along with this. So that having that capability is a key piece to this presence. By the way, those rules are called session management. So just keep that in the back of your head because we're going to deal with session management coming up. Improve the ease of use and integration. Become smarter about prioritizing and routing. We can maintain our privacy, and then we can enable these next generation services. So those were the key elements I wanted to address here. And again, my apologies today for we're still sort of getting used to this remote handoff on the GoToMeeting solution that we've got here. But hopefully this information has been good, and I believe that this information can give you a little bit more knowledge about some of the function and process that SIP can bring to the business and hopefully help you change the way you communicate. So with that, I will say thank you very much, and I will hand the call back to you, Patty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you all for joining us today. And if you'd like to discuss the topic of SIP and presence, please contact your VDN account executive. Or if you don't yet have a dedicated account executive, please see the contact information on the screen, and I will be sure to promptly get you in touch with one of our account executives. Thanks again, folks. Hope you join us for our next session at the end of July, and we'll send you out an email tomorrow with that registration information. Thanks again.